The Sex Pistols may not have created the genre, but they did become its representative in the late 1970s. The Pistols were brazen, crude, and gleefully provocative when they formed in the midst of a severe economic downturn in Britain in a musical landscape dominated by prog, disco, and staged arena rock. They spat in the face of the British cultural establishment with a howled message of political anarchism and anti-authoritarianism. Even though they only existed for 2 years and only released one album, they had a significant impact on both the US and the UK because of the punk boom they started, which completely changed the music industry and gave rise to thousands of bands. The Sex Pistols were founded in London in 1975 and were brought together by manager Malcolm McLaren, a visual artist, store owner, and former manager of the New York Dolls. Before settling on the Sex Pistols, they were first known as the Strand, then the Swankers. McLaren had a vision for a band that would offend on every level. He enlisted 19-year-old John Lydon, who had no singing experience but was a born provocateur with an insane charm, to sing for a trio made up of regulars at his boutique, guitarist Steve Jones, drummer Paul Cook, and bassist Glen Matlock. The Sex Pistols set out to cause a sensation with Lydon, now known as Johnny Rotten, at the microphone, and they were incredibly successful. Their debut performance was cut short after a fight. Later public appearances were chaotic. Infuriating editorials and prohibitions were published. After being signed by EMI Record, the Pistols' first record, Anarchy in the UK, and their follow-up single, God Save the Queen, released by Virgin Record, both sparked significant controversy, leading to their termination. By the time the second single was released, Lydon's pal John Ritchie aka Sid Vicious, who had no prior musical training, had taken Matlock's place as the bassist. Conflict with John Lydon was the reason of the breakup, notwithstanding Malcolm McLaren's claims that his influence on the Beatles led to his termination. Not that big of a Beatles fan, claims Matlock. Vicious, who is self-destructive and nihilistic, gave the Pistols' reputation an additional element of terror. Never mind the Bollocks, the band's lone album The Sex Pistols were made available in October 1977. Although it did not perform well in the United States, it reached number 1 in the UK. However, the band's UK tour was difficult because many venues would not accept their booking. The group began its first US tour in December 1977, concentrating on small locations in the South, an itinerary planned by McLaren for maximum culture clash. It was a misguided endeavor hampered by visa issues, postponed gigs, rude and physically aggressive spectators, vicious escalating heroin use, and developing band instability. The band essentially broke up after the band's final performance at San Francisco's Winterland Ballroom, where Rodden's parting comments to the audience were, "Ever get the sensation you've been cheated?" The band's dissolution was revealed the next day. Johnny Rotten founded Public Image Limited, which released a string of well-liked singles in the UK, and changed his identity back to John Lydon. Sid Vicious was detained in New York City on suspicion of killing his girlfriend Nancy Spungen. On February 2, 1979, Sid Vicious passed away from a heroin overdose that his mother had purchased for him. Given Sid's extreme depression about his part in the death of his girlfriend, groupie Nancy Spungen, it was probably a deliberate suicide. The Sid and Nancy movie from 1986 was about the duo. The 4 original Pistols got back together in 1996 for what they called the Filthy Lucre Tour, and since then, they have taken part in a number of further performances and tours. Sex Pistols were elected to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2005. They declined to attend the event in classic punk rock fashion and complained about the organization in a letter to Rolling Stone magazine. Jan Wenner, the founder of Rolling Stone, read the letter in its entirety during the ceremony. Next to the Sex Pistols' rock and roll in that Hall of Fame is a piss stain. Your museum. Urine in wine. We're not coming. We're not your monkey, and so what? Fame at $25,000 if we paid for a table, our $15,000 to squeak up in the gallery, goes to a non-profit organization selling us a load of old famous. Congratulations. If you voted for us, hope you noted your reasons. You're anonymous as judges, but you're still music industry people. We're not coming. You're not paying attention. Outside the shitstem is a real Sex Pistol. As punk was rebelling not only against society but also the complicated progressive music, of which Pink Floyd were the perfect example, Johnny Rotten was known to wear a shirt that read, "I hate Pink Floyd." When Rotten was introduced to David Gilmour, the Pink Floyd guitarist, Rotten reportedly apologized for the hoax and claimed he was a fan of Pink Floyd. The Sex Pistols impressed me quite a bit. Johnny Rotten and I performed together at Sadler's Wells, and he admitted that he didn't actually despise Pink Floyd as much as he thought he did. I'll admit that I didn't initially fully believe it. Who could oppose us, after all? Their sole studio album, Never Mind the Bollocks, Here's the Sex Pistols, was released. The rest were either live albums, collections, or soundtracks for films. Steve Jones was the lead singer when the band was first formed. When founding member Wally Nightingale left, he switched to guitar because the band needed a frontman. Johnny Rotten was hired after lip-syncing the Alice Cooper song, I'm 18, during his interview with the band's manager Malcolm McLaren. In his description of the group as musical vaudeville and evil burlesque, Johnny Rotten acknowledged that their stage performances and image were just as significant as their music. He was heavily influenced by Alice Cooper. When Sid Vicious was being held for the murder of Nancy Spungen in 1978, John Lydon disclosed to the Scottish Daily Record that Mick Jagger had paid for his legal representation. I don't think Malcolm lifted a finger. Mick Jagger is a decent guy, and I like him for that. John Lydon discussed how being vocal has been both a blessing and a curse in an interview. I might become my own worst enemy merely by stating what I perceive. Sometimes the truth is painful, but it must be said. In the Lockerbie bombing on December 21, 1988, John Lydon and his wife Nora nearly perished because they were scheduled to board Pan Am Flight 103, which was hit by a bomb and killed all 243 passengers and 16 crew members. Lydon, however, claimed that, "We cancelled, because she didn't pack her case in time."